So those 5 Labour mayors, they're meeting today, I think they might even be meeting now, to issue a plea to the Prime Minister not to scrap that HS2 link between Birmingham and Manchester.
Yes, so Sunak has refused to guarantee the HS2 line will make it to Manchester. And that's just days before the conference kicks off in that very city, as some ministers warned that the project's price has nearly tripled since it began. Well, not just warned, it has.
It certainly has.
It's ballooned.
And, of course, yesterday on yesterday's show, we had Lord Berkeley talk to us. He, of course, conducted an independent review into HS2, and he says, forget the cost soaring from 32 billion to 100 billion, as we fear. He says it will be closer to 180 billion. So, is it time to scrap the lot?
Yeah, so joining us to discuss this is the director of the CPMA, Mike Ridgeway, and Conservative MP Greg Smith. Thank you both for joining us. Greg, what is your feeling towards this project? Do you think it is time now to scrap the lot, regardless of the billions that have already gone into it?
Yeah, absolutely. It was a mistake from the very, very beginning. It was never, ever going to work. It was never going to be affordable. It was never actually going to bring any real value to the United Kingdom. We don't need another north-south route. We need the regional connectivity, particularly in the north, but in some parts of the south of England as well. I'm very much with Tony Berkeley on this, that he worked out that you can get the overall loss down to still an eye-watering amount of money, but down to about £8 billion by repurposing some of the land that's already been taken. Now, £8 billion is a huge amount of money to waste, but I would argue it is better to waste £8 billion than spend another 100, 150, 200 billion of taxpayers' money that we just can't afford.
For Buckingham, that's one of the areas that's been affected. Do you feel this way because your constituents are telling you how they feel?
So, my constituents suffer real, and I don't use this phrase lightly, real human misery in the construction of this project. We've seen farms ripped apart, businesses ripped apart, people's homes that, in some cases have stood for centuries in the Buckinghamshire countryside, knocked down. The impact of the construction of HS2 is absolutely horrendous. I can't underline that enough. But if you go up in the helicopter and you look down at the whole picture, the big piece, the nation can't afford it. We can't afford £200 billion on a railway that is just going to be another route north-south. For a fraction of that money, we could have upgraded the West Coast Main Line. We could have recreated the Great Central Line, which would have been far less destructive, to ensure that we do have the freight routes, that we do have the passenger routes that are necessary. HS2 is, it's a horrible project of government by shiny thing that had absolutely no real business case to start with. And Mail broke the story the other day that now the business case is down to 90p return for every pound spent on HS2.
Mike Ridgeway, what about that? The business case is... Yes, Greg, thanks for that. Let's bring Mike Ridgeway in. Mike, what of that assertion that the business case is declining every week, every month, and we know that people won't need trains as much because so many people now can work from home, they can work on Zoom or Teams?
I think this is typical of people that think everything you invest in is going to be a failure. This project has been bedeviled by Treasury civil servants' involvement in it all. Now, let's look at the holistic effect of large infrastructure developments. Just to let you know, Andrew, I came back from Singapore this weekend, and I've been seeing large projects underway over there. They don't mess about, they don't dither, they get on with it. We can't in this country. Now, where would we be with infrastructure projects if we adopted this approach about the M25? I can remember the rows about that when it was built. What does Stephen think, your MP there, about being a London MP without an M25? Then we got the business of the Channel Tunnel. Oh, we can't build the Channel Tunnel. The Channel Tunnel will never be used. People will be frightened of going in it. And all this not a nonsense. How would we get to the continent now in a low-carbon way without the Channel Tunnel? And I'm afraid people just do not understand the international perspective of government dithering on this sort of project.
You mentioned
I can go on, Andrew, if you want to talk about what's the situation in the north of England. I'm speaking to you from West Yorkshire, stone's throw from Leeds, where this meeting's taking place. I don't generally support Labour mayors, I can assure you of that. But on this occasion, they've got it dead right. We must carry on with this project to demonstrate internationally and domestically we're capable of building new project, which once built will be a success.
But let's bring Greg Smith back. Why are we so appalling at these major infrastructure projects? And Mike talked about the Channel Tunnel. That was supposed to link parts of Scotland and the north. It never did. They abandoned all of that. So why are we so bad, Greg?
I think the way we do infrastructure in this country, and this goes for many projects, but certainly HS2, is incredibly backward. A concept gets floated. In the case of HS2, a concept was floated under the last Labour government, and then we had over a decade rowing about the concept of it, until eventually in 2017 the green light was given, the Hybrid Act was passed for phase one, and only at that point did we start designing the thing in detail, which is, of course, where you then find out that actually you can't go through this bit of land, or there's an ancient woodland there, or there's complicated factors here, or you can't bore under that, or a sinkhole will appear, and all the things that have caused the costs to balloon for HS2. I think if we had a more sensible debate about the detailed design of infrastructure from the very start, we wouldn't fall into these absolute bear traps of projects in the first place. And I would also say that you need to have a bit of a common sense test to infrastructure. The fact that not a single private pound would be spent on HS2, not one investor, not one business group was willing to touch it at all, should have been the big shining red beacon that actually there wasn't the demand for this thing, that this thing wasn't going to fly. Because if the private sector won't touch it, if they can't see the value in it, even for a little bit, it's probably not a good idea.
Get Mike back in.
I mean, Mike, do you want to come in there? Come in.
Look, there are other benefits to this other than thinking how much money we're going to make out of it. What about the reduction of freight? HS2 would take capacity off the rail network to allow more freight to be travelled on the railway. What would that do for decarbonising? Very good. My company in Bradford in Yorkshire, we employed people from Germany. And do you know what we have to do? We have to get on the M25 every time to go over to Manchester Airport. We did it 65 times in 18 months. Now, if there was a decent infrastructure linked to HS2, then it would take it forward into Northern Powerhouse Rail between Manchester, Leeds, Bradford. We would eliminate all that extra traffic on the roads. And lastly, I make the point, will take 37 minutes to get from London to Birmingham on HS2. Now, would we need a third London runway if we could get to Birmingham in that time and use Birmingham Airport? I mean, there's a lot of these unforeseen consequences.
Mike, do you think there should be? Sorry to interrupt you, but do you think there should be any limit on the amount of money the government puts into this project? Because it is our money, it is taxpayer money, and if a project is so massively over the original estimate, surely we need to rethink. And you compare to, the Channel Tunnel and other projects, but surely each project needs to be assessed on its own terms. It needs to have its own cost-benefit analysis. It's not just, we did the M25, so therefore this is a good project.
Yeah, but if you could rely on the calculations that come out of the Treasury, that's one of the problems with all this. It wasn't really thought through like that. We've just got to take into account that we've spent the money, and we had to look how much money did we spend on PPE? 30 billion. Nobody's having a big hoo and high cry about that.
Right. Two wrongs don't make a right, do they? Mike?
No, they don't, but it indicates how you take on things.
Right. Let's go back to Greg for the last word. Greg, the Tories are gathering in Manchester. I cannot believe for a second that Rishi Sunak is going to allow the cancellation of this project just before you gather in Manchester for the Tory conference. You can imagine what a field day the Labour mayor will have up there, Andy Burnham, and all those other Labour mayors who, by the way, don't appear to realise their own leader trashed HS2 in the House of Commons 5 years ago.
Well, this is one of those rare examples where Captain Hindsight was right the first time when he opposed HS2. But, what I would say is don't take Manchester as one unified voice on HS2. When I talk to colleagues like James Grundy, who represents Lee, he's totally opposed to HS2 because he sees the devastation it would bring to his constituency through the Goulburn link, and he sees the cost of the whole thing robbing his constituents and robbing Manchester of actually the regional connectivity that they're crying out for. I'm on the Transport Select Committee. We've been to the north of England to take scientific evidence, and actually the overwhelming demand from the north of England, is that east-west regional connectivity, not a very expensive high-speed line to bring people south.
Yeah, but HS2 will be part of it.
Go on, Mike.
HS2 will be part of it.
HS2. When I talk to my constituents, when I talk to people on the Transport Select Committee, people aren't clambering to get to Birmingham 20 minutes faster. They want a seat on the train. They want a reliable train on the West Coast Main Line or the Chiltern Line. They want a toilet on it that doesn't resemble the facilities tent at Glastonbury after day 3. That's what they actually want. They're not clambering for 20 minutes quicker.
No.
How long does it take to get from Leeds to Birmingham now compared to how long it would take if the HS2 was constructed? It's nearly an hour and a half to get to Birmingham from Leeds. Now, HS2 will dramatically halve that period. You're not taking into account the benefits of HS2 linking into a Northern Powerhouse rail complex.
Gentlemen,
it won't, because the eastern leg's already been scrapped.
Yeah, gentlemen, we're
But
going
this is the problem. You know what? I'd completely agree with Mike if we'd done this quicker to time and to budget. But now it's falling apart at the seams. But thank you for having the debate. That was fantastic. Conservative MP Greg Smith and Mike Ridgeway from the Consumer Packaging Manufacturers Alliance, director of.
It's a lively old discussion,
it's a
isn't it? And
difficult one.
I feel very torn on it, because on the one hand, I can't bear the thought that we've spent 19 billion, potentially 30 billion, we're going to scrap it. Well, what's the point of that, to get to Birmingham a bit quicker? But equally, if Lord Berkeley's right and it's going to cost 180 billion, that's far too much for a railway.
Far too much. I just wish we could build things on time.
Yeah, but Mike's been to Singapore, I've been to Singapore. They do infrastructure brilliantly, as they do in China.
There's a lot of people who said it was a flawed project from the start. Let us know what you think.